Good evening. Welcome to Fine Print. I'm Molly Gambhir. Even as the United States seems close to an agreement with the Taliban on core American interests, the next steps in the Afghanistan peace talks remain unclear, primarily over what Afghanistan's political future could look like. And an unnerved Afghanistan President Ashraf Ghani has written a letter to American President Donald Trump. President Ghani has offered reduced costs for keeping U.S. troops in his country. The letter comes just a few days after the most serious negotiations between American diplomats and Taliban representatives in Qatar. Ashraf Ghani, it seems, is worried about the consequences of an abrupt American withdrawal from an intractable war that has lasted nearly 2 decades. Ashraf Ghani is concerned about a hasty U.S. pullout by an increasingly impatient Donald Trump, fearing that it may unravel the fragile Afghanistan state and lead to a Taliban renaissance in power. The letter also coming just a few days after the most serious negotiations between American diplomats and Taliban representatives ended on what both sides considered an upbeat note in Qatar. Ashraf Ghani's letter to Trump asked for teams from both sides to discuss details of where the costs could be reduced. It also envisioned how the troop levels could be brought down from the current 14,000 to a more efficient level. If the troops are reduced to around 3,000, it could help Washington save almost $2 billion. Meanwhile, the U.S. point person in that dialogue, Zalmay Khalilzad, took to Twitter saying, and I'm quoting, "We made significant progress on 2 vital issues, counter-terrorism and troop withdrawal. That does not mean we are done. We are not even finished with these issues yet. And there is still work to be done on other vital issues like intra-Afghan dialogue and a complete ceasefire." He also went on to say that the 40-year-long war cannot be brought to an end with just a meeting spanning 6 days. Here's where things stand as of now. U.S. officials say the Taliban must engage in direct talks with Afghanistan leaders about the country's political future before a withdrawal deal with the United States can be concluded. But time is running out thanks to Donald Trump's impatience. The Taliban are yet to signal that they are willing to talk to the Afghanistan government. And even if the Taliban show that intent, the Afghan side is divided in ways that seem difficult to reconcile. And joining us on the broadcast this evening is Michael Kuverman, Senior Associate for South Asia. Let's begin by asking you for your reaction to what Ashraf Ghani has proposed in that letter addressed to U.S. President Donald Trump. There are many in the Afghan political circles who look at Ghani as an obstacle to peace. Is he resistant to the U.S. withdrawal and pushing that deal because he worries it could hurt his bid for a second 5-year term?
Well, certainly. I mean, if this peace process that has sidelined Kabul continues to play out in the U.S. and the Taliban sign some sort of deal without Afghanistan, that would certainly make Ghani look bad, and that conceivably could undercut his prospects for re-election. However, I do think that Ghani has good reason for being concerned, and I don't think we should only attribute this concern on his part to politics. I mean, it is very true that if Kabul is sidelined from this dialogue between the U.S. and the Taliban, it could cause a lot of stability risk to Afghanistan. I mean, if the U.S. and Taliban agree on some sort of deal in which the Taliban says that it will agree to a ceasefire and it says that it will agree to talks with Kabul, the U.S. would then have its troop withdrawal plan in place. It could start withdrawing troops. It would not be able to enforce any type of commitment from the Taliban to actually stop fighting and to start talking to the Afghan officials, and that could plunge Afghanistan into a tremendous amount of instability, much more than what it has now. So I think both factors are at play. I mean, Ghani is certainly concerned about political implications, but also the very real fears that Afghanistan could be in really big trouble if there is this deal that does not include the Afghan government.
And is this a proposal that could work well for the United States, according to you?
Well, I mean, from the perspective of the Trump administration, particularly Trump himself, the U.S. government wants to get a deal and it wants one fast so that it can get out. Trump clearly wants to get out of Afghanistan, and he wants to have a deal, any type of deal, to give him the cover to initiate a troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. So in that sense, if this framework agreement that the U.S. now has with the Taliban becomes a full-fledged deal, then that would be good for the United States, unless the deal were to fall apart. And let's face it, if there's a deal between the U.S. and the Taliban, and the U.S. starts withdrawing troops, and then the Taliban decides not to hold up its end of the bargain, and it decides to start fighting, and it doesn't talk to Kabul, that would be a pretty major defeat, strategic defeat for the United States. It would make the United States look bad. So I think at this point it's sort of too early to tell how beneficial this type of deal would be for the United States. We'd have to see if it actually holds and if the Taliban holds up its end of the bargain.
And as you're mentioning, of course, Ashraf Ghani does have a good enough reason to fear, given that Afghanistan has in a way been not involved in the peace talks so far.
Yeah, I mean, this is true. I mean, it's absurd to think that a country that's been at war for so many years could be left out of a peace process to end that war. I mean, it boggles the mind. It simply can't happen. That's why there needs to be some way to get the Afghan government into this conversation between the U.S. and the Taliban, which of course has also included the Saudis and the Pakistanis and others involved in these discussions. But the Taliban has been very consistent for many years that it regards the Afghan government, particularly the current Afghan government, is illegitimate. And that's why I worry that even if it claims it will agree to talk to Kabul eventually, I really don't know if it would. I think it would just take advantage of an opportunity, particularly if you have a U.S. troop withdrawal, take advantage of a major battlefield advantage to take the fight more intensely to try to overthrow the Afghan government.
All right, we're going to leave it there for the moment. Michael Kugelman, thanks very much indeed for getting us. But meanwhile, Russia is also all set to host the Afghan and Taliban politicians opposed to President Ashraf Ghani. Reports quoting U.S. officials have called it a move by Moscow to promote its role as a power broker and an attempt to quote-unquote muddle the U.S.-backed peace process. The proposal to hold talks is also being seen as Russia taking forward its attempts to bring both the warring parties within Afghanistan to the table for talks. The Taliban had for long refused to speak to the Afghani government, calling them puppets of the United States. Now, this attempt at mediation by Russia is a continuation of that effort known as the Moscow format, which had held its last round of talks in November. Russia had to overcome resistance on both sides for bringing the two sides to talks. While the Taliban had in the past condemned the Afghanistan president as illegitimate, the Afghan government accused Russia of boosting the Taliban's legitimacy on the world stage. The last conference in the Moscow format was attended by 12 countries, including Pakistan, China, India, US, and 5 former Soviet republics. India had made its presence felt through a non-official delegation comprising 2 well-known former diplomats, T.C. Raghavan and Amar Sinha. In the opening ceremony, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov had said that their efforts are aimed at creating favorable conditions for the start of direct talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban. Observers believe that this may be Russia's bid to regain influence in a country from where its forces had to withdraw 3 decades ago.
The Taliban will likely come back to Moscow along with politicians who are opposed to the government. No sign of the actual Afghanistan government coming to Moscow on Tuesday. But I think Moscow is hoping that if it can get its dialogue together, get those two sides talking, even if it's with the opposition politicians, then that might move towards talking with the actual Afghanistan government itself. The US, as you say, sees this as a disruptive force, that this is Moscow confusing things slightly by having a second peace talks going along while the US ones are still going, and they see this as just a confusion. But of course Russia and the US are poles apart at the moment in terms of their relationship with each other, so Russia's going to continue anyway.
It is a move which has potentially huge strategic implications. Diplomatic sources in Pakistan telling WION World is one that Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is expected to visit Pakistan in the 3rd week of February. During his visit between the 15th and 17th of February, Pakistan is likely to sign several MOUs worth $15 billion, the biggest ever investment in Pakistan. The Saudi prince will be accompanied by a 102-member delegation, including some ministers. The Crown Prince had met with Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan during the Global Investors Conference in Saudi Arabia last October. Khan had travelled to Riyadh for seeking aid from the Saudi leadership in order to help his country come out of the financial mess and escape the balance of payments crisis. The Saudi government had then agreed to give Pakistan $3 billion in foreign currency emergency support and a further loan of $3 billion in deferred payments for oil imports. Reports say that the Saudis are now planning to invest in an oil refinery, power generation project, petrochemicals and mining as well in Pakistan. But it's not known if the Saudi desire to build a refinery near the Gwadar port, being developed with China's help, would be welcomed at all in Beijing. The help from Saudi Arabia, China and the UAE is likely to help Pakistan reduce the size of a bailout package that it is seeking from the International Monetary Fund. Meanwhile, there are a few reports that suggest that the Saudi Crown Prince may be planning a visit to India in February. The visit may come as a boost for the Indian government, as the Saudi investment in the country is relatively low. The sweeping crackdown on corruption in Saudi Arabia has come to an end. The purge, which had been ordered by the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in November 2017, saw well over 381 people, which included several high-profile princes. Top business tycoons and ministers of the Saudi Arabia administration were rounded up and held captive at the five-star Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh. In a statement, the Saudi Royal Court on Wednesday claimed that over $106 billion had been recovered for the state coffers. But interestingly, the corruption crackdown has ended as suddenly as it began. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had claimed that the corruption purge was necessary, as it was shock therapy which the Saudi economy needed to diversify itself beyond oil exports. However, as the corruption purge had predominantly targeted those who were perceived as rival power centers among the Saudi elite, bin Salman's corruption purge was seen as a power play and an exercise to consolidate his own position. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's cousins, such as billionaire investor Prince Awaldid bin Talal, National Guard Minister Prince Mitteb and former Riyadh Governor Prince Turki bin Abdullah had been rounded up as a part of that purge. According to reports, the likes of Prince Alwadin Talal, who were also tortured and only released after paying up a hefty settlement amount of over $1 billion. However, the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul has severely dented the image of the Saudi Crown Prince. Earlier, remember, there were also strong reactions coming in against that crackdown. After the crackdown in India, Johnson & Johnson baby powder is now all set to be taken off the shelves in Sri Lanka. The island nation has halted imports until the company proves its product is free from the cancer-causing asbestos. Two government officials and the product's local distributor have confirmed this development to Reuters. While the existing stocks of the product can still be sold, where there will be no new imports of the talc until the fresh test results come from Johnson & Johnson India, because that's where Sri Lanka imports the product from, a popular healthcare product across Sri Lanka and much of Asia. Reports of the baby powder containing asbestos broke on the 14th December last year. Reuters reported that the U.S. Drugs and Consumer Products Group knew it for decades. That led to a series of crackdowns by government authorities in many countries, including India. The report was based on thousands of pages of memos, internal reports and other confidential documents. Johnson & Johnson, the US-based drugs and consumer products giant, lashed out at the Reuters report, calling it one-sided, false and inflammatory. A spokeswoman for Johnson & Johnson India declined to comment on the halt of shipments to Sri Lanka, but said that the company is fully cooperating with the Indian government and awaiting results from the testing. Onto a special report. If you think healthy dishes cannot be prepared fast, you're wrong. In a record attempt, 300 healthy dishes were prepared in under 5 minutes. Our correspondent Siddharth MP reporting on that attempt.
Clad in whites, gloves on, apron on, chef hat on. Hundreds of chefs sort the ingredients and get them ready. They seem to be on a mission, but what's this all about?
No boil and no oil concept. They have prepared nearly 300 dishes, and preparing the dishes without oil was really a big challenge. We were thinking whether it will have taste or how 300 dishes could be prepared. But they came up with many dishes like idlis, biryani and sandwiches, which utilize only the natural items.
It's an attempt to set a world record. 300 students preparing 300 unique dishes using fruits, vegetables and grains. What's more, none of them used oil or fire. All this done in under 5 minutes.
2 days we were trained for this. We were explained all the 300 dishes yesterday before. There was an interactive session with the chef. He actually explained a few dishes which are difficult, but as hotel management student, we had an idea of how to get it done.
It was an all-natural feast. Down to every detail, unprocessed ingredients were used.
We all used natural sugar like palm sugar or brown sugar, whatever sugar, the alternative for the healthy lifestyle. So that is the main concept. And even the grains, if you see, we didn't use the regular cereals and the grains. We all used very traditional grains like millet, jowar, or bajra, all these other traditional cereals and pulses, so which is very healthy.
In a matter of minutes, the colorful dishes were ready, served and showcased on areca leaf plates, topped with plantain leaves.
In a world record attempt in Chennai, 300 students from hotel management institutes got together to prepare 300 unique dishes just using fruits and vegetables. What more, they did not use oil, neither did they use fire in this attempt to cook 300 dishes in under 5 minutes. With video journalist Karthik in Chennai, this is Siddharth, WION World is One.
How many of you would have the courage to face your fears like this Scottish biker? Chris Kyle took his courage to dizzying new heights quite literally this week as he faced his fears and leapt out of a helicopter and onto the helipad of the iconic Purge Al Arab Hotel on Dubai's coast. The biker jumped 14 feet from the chopper and onto a 12-foot ramp before taking another 30-foot drop onto the red carpet that led him into the hotel. Kyle said that he had to face his fear of heights for that jump.